Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships for our Saturday upgrading commander build video. A little late today because I'm just wrapping up my new PC build. But with that being said, we are going to be checking out the Tier 9 heavy cruiser, the Encounter, today. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on the ship, the upgrades, modules, commander build, so on and so forth. As I've moved I had a higher point commander whom I've since moved off to the Tier 10. But we're going to go ahead and dive right in and start talking about this ship. So what type of cruiser is the Encounter? Is she a brawling cruiser, a sniping cruiser, or a mid-range cruiser? I would define Encounter best as mid-range. You don't really want to push in unless opportunity allows you to. Otherwise, you're going to be playing the mid-range, which I typically define mid-range and the high tiers in World Warships as being 12 kilometers and up. So let's say 12 to 15 kilometers. Now, no, I don't have concealment expert on the commander, so our conceal does actually drop down more than this. I think like it's close to 10.5 if I remember right. But we'll talk about that. So really, you want to be playing beyond your concealment to that 12 to 15 kilometer range. And granted, if you take the main battery reload or mod in the sixth slot, main battery modification 3 in the 6th slot, your artillery is only 16.5 kilometer range, and you don't get spotter planes. So that's where you're capped out at unless you take another different upgrade, which we'll talk about. But the reason why I say she's more mid-range cruiser, and you want to be playing, that 12 to 15-ish area, is also because of her armor. And as I talked about in yesterday's video, the best way I can define, I don't mean this as an insult, but it is an insult. Encounter is basically the big, dumb, clumsy brother of Neptune. Neptune's more agile, better propulsion, better turning circle radius. But smaller guns, where Encounter is kind of more this larger, robust cruiser that has a longer turning rudder shift time, bigger turning circle radius. It doesn't have the built-in propulsion, and it's still sluggish, and she just can't take punches very well. So you're covered in a lot of 25mm plating, from the fore-end plating, and then as well as the aft-end plating. Now note, you can see that the nose is pretty large, where you get more of this 27mm protection, on the deck, and then this upper plating, and then coming down to the armor belt being 152, which drops down to 27 underneath. So ideally, I would say you're better off kind of kiting if you want to have a little bit more armor. Now, granted, even when I take this away, Encounter has a very large superstructure. So you can definitely be farmed by that when you're seeing a lot of the 16mm plating across the superstructure. Once you start taking things away, so there's that deck we was talking about, right? But then go beneath, it's a 38mm, and then it is an exposed citadel. So you don't really want to be going broadside unless you have to. Now, it's interesting on this ship because typically the citadel will go all the way towards the forward main battery turret to the rear main battery turret. Wargaming didn't do that with this ship, probably because it was probably detonating and exploding all the time. So what they did was they shrunk it back, but then they made it quite tall above the water line. So you really don't want to be caught broadside if you can help it. Like as in the Friday highlight, you saw me get wrecked citadel hits from Richthofen, and then maybe a Tier 8 Russian aircraft carrier, can't remember. But we definitely did get citadel by rocket planes attack aircraft from the Richthofen. And then in addition to a lot of the battleships, battle cruisers, you have to watch your broadside. So do be very much mindful of that. And I would also be wary of something like a Malta or Hakuyu or something with the AP dive bombers, also very much likely to wreck you. So do keep that in mind. When you look at the turrets, they're pretty thinly armored, only 25mm. I think all around, if I recall. Yeah. So your turrets can easily be knocked out. So that's something we will talk about here. And then let me just note and show you where the torpedoes are. So they're actually kind of tucked in a little bit. If I drop out and then I go back into the armor scheme here, you can see it's kind of, did they consider it with the armor scheme? Yeah, just part of the 16 millimeter plating, yeah, kind of around it. So do be mindful that those can be knocked out if people are purposely aiming for them. But with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the modules first. So with the main battery mod 3 in the 6 slot, we're getting our reload time down to 8.6 seconds. This doesn't take anything like Adrenaline Rush or a top grade gunner as example into account. But without grease the gears on our commander, we're at 34.5 second 180 return time. So you really do want to be looking at getting that down, so it's not like the battleship traverse speed for just these 2 and 3 millimeter guns. Your HE shell damage is 2,950. Your AP shell damage 4,350. Your hull, this is the first thing you're going to want to upgrade if you're growing up the line. You're going to add hit points. You're going to buff your already crap AA defense, and then you're going to have a slight buff in your maneuverability, which honestly you need all those things. Encounter has the 3rd worst AA strength in the game, technically 4th if you say Chikuma 2, and then there's the Chikuma 2 gold. So she's just absolutely abysmal with her AA, so having a little bit more helps. You'll still definitely struggle against tier 8 CVs, but having the additional hit points, you know, to put you over the 41,000 is really good, and that's even without taking survivability expert on the commander, which we'll talk about. Your torpedoes, these are 533 millimeter torpedoes. And I have to actually remind myself here so I don't say it wrong. Yeah, they're 2x4 racks, so 8 torpedoes total, 4 on each side. They have a 96-second reload time. Torpedo range 13.5, so actually pretty decent. Maximum damage 16,767. Torpedo speed 65 knots. Detectability range 1.3 kilometers. So they're just nice to spam out there. I think if you saw the Friday highlight video yesterday, we actually killed a destroyer with these sitting in the smoke. Gunfire control system, your stock range is 15 kilometers, and then the upgrade is 16.5. So this is definitely a hot second need for sure, because especially playing at the higher tiers, 15 kilometers is pretty brutal at tier 9, and then if you're seeing tier 10 and super CVs, or super ships, excuse me. Propulsion, 33 knots with the 90,000 horsepower. We can actually take Ceramike and go 34.7, which I do recommend running the Ceramike flag if you're able to when we go to look at our consumable layout, or combat signal layout. So you have decent speed, especially when you pair that with the Ceramike flag. Upgrade wise, first I'm going to recommend taking the main armaments mod 1. This reduces the risk of your main battery and torpedo tubes becoming incapacitated by negative 20%, and then improves the main battery and torpedo tube survivability by plus 50%, and reduces the main battery repair time of the main battery and torpedo tubes by negative 20%. Especially because they're just so vulnerable. You wouldn't look at building into the secondaries of the AA. You wouldn't take magazine modification 1, which just reduces the risk of your ship's magazine detonating by negative 70%. If you're playing randoms, ranked clan battles, you're going to be wanting taking the Juliet Charlie combat signal, which completely eliminates risk of your ship's magazine detonating, and then we don't bother with the damage control party mod 1. In the second slot, there's 2 options I would say that are very much to look at. If you do not want to make a coal investment in for a special upgrade, then I'm going to recommend taking the engine room protection. This reduces the risk of your engine and steering gears becoming incapacitated by negative 20%, and reduces the engine and steering gear repair time by negative 20%. If you have the coal resources, then I would definitely look at taking the hydroacoustic search modification 1, which is going to extend the action time of your hydroacoustic search. One of the challenges we actually have with this ship is that our smoke lasts longer than our hydro. So, if you want to be able to try to buff your action time on your hydroacoustic search, so it can more match the timing of your crawling smoke generator, then I'd say you definitely want to look at picking this up. Now, this is only if you feel like you're going to be playing Encounter a lot. You can still buy it as you upgrade the line if you want to have it for the tier 10. Then you can just demount it for 25 doubloons and remount it on the tier 10 Cerberus, something like that. But I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like in the armory. It costs 17,000 coal. With a coupon, it will be 12,750 in total. So I always try to take advantage of these every update cycle, every once a month, just because it does help you save coal and build up your coal supply over time. So then that 100-second action time becomes 120-second action time because you're buffing it by 120 seconds, which then is only 2 seconds behind the crawling smoke generator, but that's going to change when we start looking at some combat signals. Now note that in the third slot, this is actually taking the smoke generator mod 1, which improves the smoke generator consumable action time by plus 20%, or the smoke curtain generator consumable action time by plus 20%, but we're looking at the smoke generator consumable action time. So that's what gets us up to the 122.4 seconds. So it's actually really good, and that's, as I said yesterday, the ship relatively plays around its crawling smoke generator. That's where she's able to really put out the damage per minute without being unnecessarily targeted by a lot of the overmatch you have at the high tiers. So I do recommend taking this. If you don't have the coal, or you don't want to make that investment, because again this would be 17,000 coal or 12,050 with the 25% coupon, then there's really two options. Either you can look at the aiming systems mod 1, which is going to improve your maximum main battery shell dispersion, and reducing it so you have a tighter horizontal and tighter vertical dispersion. Get a slight buff to your torpedoes and a little bit on your secondaries, but it's mainly the main battery accuracy. Or you could look at taking the main battery mod 2, improving your main battery traverse speed by plus 15%. So then that 34.5 drops down around 30. And again, not taking grease the gears, which we haven't mastered yet on this commander. Overall, this one I much preferred. I didn't use this at first, and then once I got it, I was like, wow, this is really helpful. The fourth slot, you're looking at taking propulsion mod 1. As I said, in comparing to Neptune or the British light cruiser line, you do not have the built-in propulsion here. You saw several times yesterday where I had to accelerate, and it's very sluggish acceleration to try to avoid torpedoes. So it's more of, you feel like a Stalingrad trying to accelerate or something like that. So if you don't have it, it's brutal. Especially as you have a lot of torpedoes in the higher tiers, and a greater number of them, so being able to avoid them is very helpful here. So I do recommend the propulsion mod 1. Alternatively, you could look at taking steering gears mod 2 if you want to reduce your rudder shift time. Not that I necessarily recommend. I think I kind of trashed this perhaps a little too hard. It's not the worst in the game. I think it's kind of middle of the pack in terms of her rudder shift time. But I think it's this, I don't know, it's just the cruiser feels so big and sluggish when you're doing a turn, like you bleed speed, where like Neptune and Minotaur you don't. So I think that's kind of why I trashed it a bit more. But in general, I think the propulsion mod 1 is the best to take here. In the fifth slot, I would say take Concealment System mod 1. This is going to improve your ship's detectability range, squadron detectability range. Dispersion of shells fired by enemies attacking your ship is going to be increased, so they have worse dispersion. But being able to reduce your detectability range, now taking that into account, brings us down to 11.7 by sea, and then 6.5 by air currently. So you do want to be reducing this as much as possible, because you can't play with, I don't think you can play the ship very well without taking the Consumables System mod 1. The steering gears mod 2, improving your rudder shift time. Yeah, okay, maybe, but you don't really have the armor to try to be juking shots if your detection radius is greater. You could talk about ship consumables mod 1. The ship is very consumable intense, so you would increase things like your hydro, your crawling smoke generator, your submarine surveillance by plus 10%. Something to consider, but I think most players will find more comfort in the Consumables System mod 1. Now in the sixth slot, I have gone for the main battery mod 3 to reduce my reload time down to 8.6 seconds. I tend to favor this one in general overall. Granted, we do take a nerf on our main battery traverse speed, thus increasing that 180-degree turn time. So you can try this out. Other players may find, with how Encounter plays, they might find the gunfire control system mod 2 to be a little bit more beneficial here in extending your main battery firing range by plus 16%. So if I do math on my phone real quick, so I said 16.5 times 1.16, then you have a 19.14 kilometer range. I will be honest and say that, and I don't always say this about a lot of the high tier cruisers in the game, but with Encounter, there's times I'm like, man, it would actually be kind of nice if I had that another kilometer or two of range, just because of how the battle's going down. If you didn't have a crawling smoke generator, I'd actually probably recommend this one. But the fact that you do kind of makes me like, yeah, lean more into the main battery mod 3. But you can try them both out and see what you think. In terms of the armament, your high explosive shells, one of the things that's really strong about the Encounter, I don't think I talked enough about in yesterday's video, I did talk about it, but maybe not at length, is the fire chance that these shells cause. We can bump this up to, I think, 21%. So if I take Victor Lima and India X-Way, that's 20%. The Demolition Expert on our commander would put us up to 21%. So, a 21% on 9 shells per salvo, really good. So you actually set a lot of fires. That's something that this ship line does really well. You're overtaxing enemy players, damage control party, or the repair party. So this is a definite strength of the ship, and you penetrate 34 millimeter. Your initial shell velocity is 841 meters a second. The armor piercing is also really good. You saw we went going up an enemy Neptune, and then we had a broadside CV. Those are the times that at least I remember that we were utilizing AP. We got some citadels, particularly on the Neptune, of course, because he's very lightly armored. So you definitely utilize the AP because these are 2 and 3 millimeter guns, so don't sleep on them. Torpedo-wise, reload time 96 seconds, 13.5 kilometer range, over 16,700 damage, 65 knots, 1.3 kilometer. You'll probably often find yourself firing these as you're kiting away from flanks, or maybe you're just spamming some out, hoping you might get lucky in taking out a random destroyer, as an example. So it is nice to have this here, especially if there is a ship to run up on you and you just like didn't really have a choice but to engage. Then you have some torpedoes up your sleeves, which a lot of the cruisers, I feel like a lot of ships that Wargaming has been introducing in the game lately all come with torpedoes. Depth charge airstrike. This is another one of the strengths beyond your high explosive, but also your ability to combat enemy submarines. You get 3 depth charge airstrike flights. Majority of ships in the game only get 2, but here on Encounter, on this Commonwealth cruiser line, you get 3. So you get 3 available flights. Is 1 aircraft per flight with 2,000 hit points, and a maximum range of 10 kilometers, and there's 2 bombs per payload. So you could put out 6 bombs total if you stack them all. So maximum bomb damage is 2,400 per bomb. So you can actually be kind of filthy here in dealing with enemy subs. And these have a reload time of 30 seconds in between them. But then going on, consumable-wise, you have a standard damage control party, action time 5 seconds, cooldown time 60 seconds, typical for cruisers. You do get the repair party, HP per second 208. If you're playing in randoms, ranked, and clan battles, and you are taking encountering clan battles, I'd say definitely take India Delta, so you can increase the amount of hit points per second that you can regenerate. Consumable action time 28 seconds, cooldown time 80 seconds. Right now we get 3 without taking Superintendent on our commander. The next slot, you have 2 options, defensive AA fire and hydroacoustic search. Honestly, the hydroacoustic search you're going to get much more value out of compared to the defensive AA fire. The AA, as I said, it's the 3rd worst in the game in terms of AA strength. Yes, the defensive AA fire could really help you, but when you're really a cruiser that's that's kind of geared for submarines and you're using smoke a lot, you're honestly going to be wanting to run the hydroacoustic search, and you might not always get a CV every game, but you can guarantee there's going to be torpedoes every game. So the hydroacoustic search detects torpedoes 3.5 kilometers away, enemy ships 5 kilometers away. You can spot submarines at their maximum depth of 2 kilometers. Right now, action time of 100 seconds, unless we were to take the hydroacoustic search mod 1 in the second slot of our upgrades, and we only get 3 again until we take Superintendent or Commander. The crawling smoke generator is something that makes this Commonwealth cruiser line rather unique. That it generates smoke, that screen that reduces your risk of being detected by enemy, and allows the ship to remain undetected at low speeds for the entire action time of the consumable. So you're going around basically at quarter speed. You can be moving, right? Or you could be reversing, and you should be staying dark. Unless there is an enemy ship that spots you within your smoke fire penalty range, which should be 7.8 here. So you do need to keep that in mind, of course. If your destroyer slips in or submarine surfaces within that, then you will be spotted and you'll need to take appropriate measures of maneuverability. But smoke screen dispersion time is 10 seconds, so if you add that on top of your action time, 102.4, you can kind of think, oh, you get a little bit longer smoke. Cooldown time is 130 seconds, number of consumables is 3. Now we can take the X-ray pop-up, which is going to increase the action time of our smoke screen generator and put it up to 134.6 seconds. Really good to have. I meant to mention it with the hydroacoustic search. Taking the Sierra Bravo will increase the action time of your hydroacoustic search to 110 seconds, and then you'd be looking at 132 point something seconds, I think, if you were to take the hydroacoustic search modification 1 there. So good things to have. Then you have submarine surveillance. This detects submarines at their maximum and periscope depths up to 8 kilometers away. Consumable action time, it's only 20 seconds, so it's a very short window. So you need to be quite confident that there's a submarine perhaps within 8 kilometers before you go to use it. This is very helpful in trying to finish off a game sooner when you're trying to hunt down that one last pesky submarine. And again, we get 3 charges, but we'll get a little more once we take Superintendent. Otherwise, I'd be looking at taking November Foxtrot. This is going to reduce the preparation reload time of your consumables. So here you see, instead of, I think that was 108, then it becomes 102.6, then instead of 130, it's 123.5, instead of 120, it's 114, instead of 80, it's 76, instead of 60, it's 57. Because you're quite consumable heavy, you can get a lot of mileage out of having the November Foxtrot. One of the things I do like to have is Hotel Yankee, but kind of having to give that up overall when engaging and building more into the combat capabilities of this cruiser that's rather consumable heavy. Going into the commander now, I'm going to go ahead and show you a 10-point build. There's 2 routes we could look at here. Either first, you could start off with the grease the gear. As we said, right now it's 34.5. With grease the gears, it drops it down to an even 30. The other thing is, you're probably looking at last stand. I have had my engine and steering gears knocked out because you don't have a ton of armor. So having this is really helpful because you're able to sustain some speed and maneuverability, but at a penalty when you lose your rudder or your engine. As an example, let's just say I felt like I wanted to have last stand first. I would do that. And then as a 3-point commander, I'd look at taking priority target. Very helpful to know when enemy ships are targeting you, just because of how vulnerable you are. Especially as you get into the high tier, you have a lot more people, battleships being cheeky, taking 25, 24 kilometer salvos at you. So if you're like, wait, none of the ships in front of me are targeting me, who's targeting me? If it's not a submarine destroyer, perhaps it might be a battleship that's further off targeting you. So helps your awareness, right? And then as a 6-point commander, you could talk about Adrenaline Rush first. You could talk about doing Superintendent first. You could talk about Survivability Expert. Now it's kind of interesting because I'm a little confused here. When you're looking here, we only get 3, right? I think there's a bug Wargaming introduced where you hear it says 5, even though we only get +1 consumable. So we're gonna have 5 hydros, we'd actually have 4 hydros, 4 smokes, 4 submarine surveillance consumables, and 4 repair parties. So a little weird that that's there. I'll go ahead and just like master this so far, just to see that bug, yeah, it doesn't go through. It's just Wargaming's messed something up with their spaghetti coding, I guess. But now it says we actually have 4. And then for 10-point commander, then I would say take concealment expert. So now you see it's 10.5 by sea, 5.9 by air, and by depths. So much better all around. Otherwise without that, you're looking at 11.7 and 6.5. So I would go ahead and I would master that. After this, it's kind of up to you in which directions you want to go, but I'll go ahead and tell you how I might go beyond a 10-point commander. Probably I really want to take grease the gears with an 11-point commander. Maybe I use some elite commander XP and just finish off level 10 to get to level 11. So then I'm looking at a now 30-second 180-degree turn time. And then let's say I want to be able to increasing my DPM between my main battery and torpedo tubes. Then I'd look at taking an adrenaline rush. So it's a 14-point commander. And then next I'd be looking at a 17-point commander and looking to take survivability expert. So without 41,700, with 45,750. So much better to have there, and making you last a little longer. Like I tried to get a RAM off, I think, in encounter the other day, and I didn't because just didn't have. I was lacking in the hit point pool. And then after this 17-point, then I would say for a 19-point commander, go ahead and take the demolition expert. So now when we look at artillery, we now have a plus 1% in chances of causing fire on a target. So we've gone from 20% to 21%. So that's one of the strengths of this cruiser line. So let's build into the strengths of the cruiser line. And then for your last 2 points, I say there's 2 options for you. It's up to you. I probably myself, I lean to the consumables enhancements because we're going to get a plus 10% on the action time of our hydroacoustic search and our smoke generator consumable action time. So that would be really nice to have, building into staying concealed for even longer with the smoke. So it puts us, I think, up over like 145, 146 seconds on the action time of the crawling smoke screen generator. Alternatively, if you want to build into dealing with submarines a bit more, we go to our airstrike. You could reduce your reload time of your airstrike from 30 to 25.5 seconds. So that's really up to you. You'll also get a slight buff on your priority sector reinforcement, being plus 25%. Right now it'd be plus 50% without, but with it goes up by plus 25%. We also get an additional shell explosions, which, if I take this away, we only have 2. That's pretty bad. So then you'd get 3. Yeah, so I think that's really all I want to say with that. So if you want to build into that, you can. Otherwise, I would say just go with this because, why not make your hydro and smoke crawling smoke generator last a little bit longer. So we're running out of time here. This is probably my preferred build that I would go for here on the encounter. Now, if I was to talk about some other options, what might I look at? If it bugs you that you don't know where the closest enemy ship is to you, radio location could be an option, but then you're sacrificing the extended duration time of your consumables and taking 1% off your fire chance. You could look at taking top grade gunner. You get a permanent effect of a negative 10% on your secondary battery reload time, and then your main battery reload time is negative 8%. But you're wanting to be within, that only comes into effect when you're within an enemy ship is within your ship's standard detectability range, which you don't really, that means you're playing underneath 10.5 kilometers. So that's just one reason I don't really recommend doing that here. But honestly, you could build into your defense. What I'm mainly thinking about is your airstrike, your depth charges. You'd be plus 510, so then 3,910 bombshell damage. But Yeah, I can't really recommend it so easily. Well, with this, I feel quite easily recommend. First choice, second choice would be focus fire training. So with that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this video up. So I hope you liked today's video on looking at the encounter a little bit more closely and getting some of my thoughts and suggestions when looking at a build here on the encounter. Of course, there's a wiggle room. You can test out some different things. It doesn't have to be exactly what I said, of course. These are just my thoughts and opinions. But this is what I feel like has worked well for me so far with the encounter. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you have already subscribed, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks as always to my Patreon supporters. Until next time, take care.